Hey, this is Joni. Last week on Friday, I gave a brief interview live on Euronews Serbia, where we discussed the Russian offensive north of Kharkiv, which has stalled, and we also discussed the lifting of the restrictions from the US on Ukraine not being allowed to strike Russian soil with US weapons. Since then, there have been some changes in terms of what we know about the lifting. Back then, when I was talking, we believed that the lifting was very limited geographically, only to the area north of Kharkiv. Since then, we have learned that it might be a bit less limited than that. But anyways, most of what I said is still true today. And here comes the interview.
Mr. Askola, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The White House has given permission for the use of American weapons against targets inside Russian territory. Although this is a big decision, the fact is that such a decision was made by the British even before as well, that the Ukrainian army is hitting those targets. However, many consider the decision risky. Why is that so?
There must be some sort of secret discussions that have taken place between the US and Russia during the last 27 months of this war. And this explains why the US has not allowed Ukraine to use its weapons to strike inside of the Russian territory. However, this lifting of this ban is not a full lifting, it's only a partial one, as it's geographically limited, and it's also limited in scope, as it doesn't allow for deep strikes inside of Russia, and it also doesn't allow to strike troops which are in Kursk Oblast or in Bryansk Oblast, which also might cross the border. So this is not actually a very risky move. Ukraine has been hitting those regions and the Russian side for a long time with its own weapons. The new thing is just that now they will be able to use American rockets and shells to do it.
Russia has previously said that if such a decision is made, it is preparing a retaliation. But if you look at the things from the Russian side of view, Crimea, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donbas, Lugansk, Kharkov, they are all part of Russia, officially from the Moscow side. So Ukraine is already hitting those places. So what is the difference between targeting Crimea or Kharkov or Belgorod region?
Yeah, that's the funny paradox. Russia officially considers these areas that are occupied as Russia for most of them, but as you said, Russia doesn't react the same way when Ukraine uses weapons, Ukrainian or Western weapons, when hitting these occupied areas and when hitting traditional official Russia. So this showed that Russia itself actually does not consider these annexed regions as Russian as the historic Russia in that sense.
Although Russia has not specified what it means by prepared response, the dilemma is really whether it means the targeting targets inside of Ukraine, which it already does, or NATO countries. What do you mean that it would be a game changer if it happens? How much likely is so?
Russia has been constantly escalating its hybrid operations inside of NATO countries, and as you said, Russia has been hitting Ukraine and Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian civilian infrastructure during the whole war, so Russia's options are quite limited in terms of escalating. They can, of course, launch another campaign of bombings for a few nights to hurt Ukrainian civilians, and they can launch hybrid operations to hurt the logistics and hurt people who support Ukraine, but at the end of the day, these are more symbolic operations than anything else. Russia doesn't really have much it can do to change the situation.
Speaking of symbolics, the operation of the Russian army in the Kharkov region is widely interpreted in military circles as diversion of attention from the real direction of attack, with the aim of stretching Ukrainian forces, which is actually the Russia's tactical goal with the attack around Kharkov, a city of 1.5 million people, that Russia can hardly threaten with the 30,000 soldiers currently deployed there.
The diversionary attack north of Kharkiv has been mostly a failure for Russia until now. It had two goals, actually. It had a military goal, which was tying up as many Ukrainian reserves as possible away from the main axis, which is near Chasiv Yar in the east. The secondary goal was a political one. It was to create a so-called buffer zone between Belgorod and Ukrainian troops. And Russia has failed at both so far. Some Ukrainian troops had to move there, but not enough for it to make a difference in Chasiv Yar. And at the same time, this has been a strategic blunder for Russia, because Russia has managed to convince Ukraine's allies to finally lift a restriction that was in place for 27 months. So even at the beginning of the full-scale war, when Ukraine was in real deep trouble, the West was not allowing Ukraine to hit Russia with weapons that it provided. And now, because of this diversionary offensive, they have allowed to do so. So this has been a massive failure so far for Russia.
Mr. Askola, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Joni Askola, vojni analitičar iz Finske.